On Target Institute presents a teaching from the Men on Target small group curriculum. Now with today's session, On Target founder Vince D'Acchioli.
Well, hello men, how you doing? Welcome to On Target, the Men on Target curriculum, session number 38. Again, a reminder, please go to the website otm.co and download the handout for this session and for all of the sessions. Really, they're very valuable resources and you're going to need them as we work through this material. In our last session, we dealt with how to manage our time, a man and his time, part 1. In this session, session number 38, we're dealing with a man and his time, and we're going to go into part 2. I want to give credit where credit is due, because many, many years ago when I began to develop some teaching around the idea of how to manage your time, I got a lot of the ideas out of a book that was written by Alan Lakin. It's probably written 30, 40 years ago, or maybe even longer. The title is How to Get Control of Your Time and Your Life. I would encourage you to pick up a copy. It's just a little book, but it has some really, really great and practical ideas in it that I think you'll really be able to discover and live out. Now, in our last session, we defined your life, we discovered how we got here, what the implications are, and what the result has been. In this session, we want to start talking about the solution, and we want to start to get practical. Let's see what the Bible says as we begin. In Ephesians 5:15-17, it says this: Be careful, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. Let's stop there for a second. And the idea that's being communicated here in the first part of our solution is to live wisely. We'll come back to that in a moment. The next one, Ephesians 5:15-17, it says in 16, making the most of every opportunity. Why? Because the days are evil. So the second idea here is to make good use of your time. Okay, that's number 2. And then it goes on to say, therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. This is huge, guys. The third area of the solution is to know the Lord's will. Okay, live wisely, make good use of your time, and know the Lord's will. Now, what I want to suggest to you is that it really does begin with knowing the Lord's will. It all starts with that. We can't really move from there and develop a strategy for living unless we catch God's vision for our life. So much of what we do with On Target Ministries and the On Target curriculum has to do with this idea, is really having the kind of relationship with God where we can discover God's vision for our life, where He wants us to go. Now, once we have God's vision, then we can establish, number 2, clear goals. And here is an idea on how to establish some clear goals. I'm going to give you a list, the sample list of some goals that you might put together, or you might find someone putting together, and these are pretty generic. Here's a goal: establishing a daily devotional time, spending more time with my family. I know that's a really good goal to have. Losing 10 pounds, maybe that's on your radar screen, or read 10 books this year. You know, requiring of ourselves to get more information and to kind of really strengthen where we are spiritually. Schedule weekly leisure time. That can be very important. Learn to play golf. Maybe that's a goal that you have. Save an additional $300 a month. Add on that bedroom extension that you're wanting, and maybe you say, well, here's a goal. I want to retire in June 2020. Here's a typical list of some goals that you might have. Again, understanding that they have to submit themselves within the context of what you believe God is calling you to do, because these goals will change depending upon the vision God is giving you. What I'm demonstrating here is the kind of the technology involved in establishing the goals and then establishing some priorities. So the third area in establishing priorities, let's go back and look at our list. And you can see that what I've done here, and again, this is very subjective, but maybe daily devotional time is an A. A, of course, is the highest priority. So maybe I establish an A as really a high priority. Spending more time with my family, again, a very high priority. Maybe the losing of 10 pounds is a C. It's down the list. And the reading 10 books, maybe not that big a deal. Scheduling weekly leisure time, maybe I determine that's a B. Learning to play golf might be a C. Save an additional $300 a month, maybe that's a little higher up, it's a B. You can see how this goes. And then the retiring by 2020 and all of that. So in this particular slide, what we're talking about is establishing an ABC priority. Alan Lakin would say, and then you might want to go back over this and find an A1. Maybe the A1 is your highest A. If you've got several A's, an A1 might be your highest A, and you'd say, I really want to drill down on that one. And that's like in the last session, maybe that's where you use the Swiss cheese method. Instead of doing the easier ones, maybe you just take a chunk out of that overwhelming A so that you can at least be moving forward on the ones that are the highest priorities, and don't get trapped into doing stuff that's the lower priority. In fact, Alan Lakin says keep the A's and B's in front of you, and for those of you who have C's, find a C drawer and take all of the C's and throw them in your C drawer, never perhaps to be ever looked at again, because oftentimes, again, we'll fall into the trap of trying to do C's when really we need to be working on some of the more important things. So a strategy for living is getting God's vision, having clear goals, establishing priorities, and then careful planning. In this idea, you want to pray for God's direction. Lord, how do I plan? It's just like for me, I'll be honest with you, this morning, I get up now every morning and I pray, Lord, what is your plan for me this day? I've already seen the bigger picture. I've got your vision. I know what my goals are. I see what my priorities are. Now, Lord, how do I spend this day in a way that I'm moving along this timeline to accomplish the things that you want me to accomplish? Not simply to be active, but to get the things done that I need to get done in order to be on your plan and on your schedule. Very, very important that you do that. Pray God every day. What do I do? How do I spend my day to day to really begin to accomplish my objectives? I also recommend that you seek input from family members. This is very important. I will go to my wife oftentimes, and when our kids are at home, I'd go to them, and we talk about, how can Dad better spend his time today, perhaps with you and with your sister, or with my wife. I might say, honey, today, what are you doing today, and how can our corporate goals and objectives be met in the way we kind of spend our day together? And that's a good thing to do, by the way, every single day. Maybe right after you spend your devotional time with God and getting input from Him. Seek input from your family members. And the other thing that I found helpful years ago, someone said, Vince, you might want to do a time audit. I said, what's a time audit? He said, well, just do it for 1 or 2 days. He suggested doing it for a week. But every 15 minutes, set your watch to go off every 15 minutes and then make a note every 15 minutes of what you did in that 15-minute block of time. Do that for all of your waking hours, okay? And at the end of the day, you've got a time audit. And then maybe look at that every single day and go back over it and then begin to evaluate how efficiently did I spend my time today. And then analyze the best way to reach your goals. Really sit down and think through what's the best way for me to reach my goals, and develop a plan for each priority. Guys, this is not rocket science. You can do this. But if you don't sit down and organize your thoughts and organize yourselves and be disciplined, life will end up managing you. And so the final one is simply live out the plan. Get God's vision, clear goals, establish priorities, do careful planning, and then go live your life. Now, start living the plan. It's time to implement. Finally, understand this, that our values in the world we live in today are changing. They're changing a lot. As I mentioned earlier, in other parts of the world, it's not real complicated, but we have made life so complicated, and we are valuing the wrong things. But in the future, here's kind of a chart that shows you what we used to value and where we are going to value. We used to value quantity of possessions. Today, we tend to value the quality of our possessions. We used to value money. Today, the value is much higher now on time. People are really thinking through, my time is much more valuable than I ever thought it was. We used to value old traditions. Now we're valuing new traditions. We used to value commitment. Unfortunately, today we're valuing more flexibility. Kind of like the idea that a lot of things can go. It's not, the commitment seems to be waning. And some of these are good, guys, and some of these are not so good. So this is for you to kind of evaluate where you might be on this continuum, okay? We used to value group identity. Now we tend to value individualism. It's all about me. I really think that we can't move away from being part of something bigger than just me. And the individualism leads to pride and arrogance, and that's not healthy. We used to value trusting people, and now we're going to value proven integrity. You know, it's not just about trusting people, it's looking for proven integrity in people. And we used to value satisfaction from our work. Today, more and more, we're finding people that are finding satisfaction in their leisure time. So these are some of the changing values that we're seeing in our culture. They're for you to look at and evaluate and ask yourself the question, how are you doing in this continuum? And it's pretty simple to figure out which is good and which ones are good and which ones are not healthy. So, life implication. Not developing a strategy for living can lead toward difficultly accomplishing God's best goals for my life. Guys, it's one thing to get God's vision, but it's another thing to take that vision and sit down and say, okay, Lord, help me work through the kind of goals and priorities I need to have to really accomplish the task before me. Very, very important. So life application, here are some discussion questions. How would you rate your success in these important areas? Maybe on a scale of 1 to 5, you can ask yourself, how am I doing in finding God's vision for my life? How am I doing in establishing clear goals? Do I even bother to sit down and write down my goals? How about having established priorities within that list of goals? Do I have priorities in my life, and how am I doing in that area? Developing an appropriate plan. Do I have a plan, and how good am I doing at developing a plan? And talk about these different areas with the guys in your group and really think through how good you're doing and make a plan, in this case, to improve. Now listen, guys, I hope you have a lively discussion, and until next time, don't forget about it. Thank you.